dean of not just Supreme Court reporting, but this kind of Supreme Court reporting. What's going on behind the scenes? And at first they came out with a disavowal. That was already, okay, man, how do you screw that up? But then it gets worse because she overheard Robert, but falsely, and she mentions it to two of her people, one of whom's in the court, and then they go running with it. That is, bizarre on steroids. And I'll just say, again, I don't know. The denial is emphatic, but your point, Ben, is the possible counter narrative of what happened here. I've been, present for a dozen easily retirements of the Supreme Court, and it's very well understood. A, they pick their terms, but B, first and foremost, they inform the president. I'm thinking especially of White and of Kennedy and of Marshall. Their first order of business is to tell the White House. And you can certainly imagine a scenario where Alito let it slip, and it was already pre-written. That I would have been the case with all of the news sources. You write that story in advance, like you write an obituary in advance, but it might already have been written with a promise. This is the ways of Washington. Nina Totenberg, you're the dean. You can have this story, but you must embargo it until I've done my protocol and what I want to do. Talk to my wife and family, perhaps, or certainly talk to the White House. And that's a sacrosanct, messing that up is a real blunder on the part of reporters, which makes this counter supposition a little bit weird too. It's like a little crazy however you slice it. But if that happened, then it would be a huge oh shit moment. You notice that Totenberg actually apologized to Alito, not just to the
almost as much as Trump wants Greenland, which makes sense. I mean, because Epstein's island is gone, he needs a new one to hang out with Bill Clinton, so...
Trump, Goose, Newts, After, Trevor, Noah, Ex-Post, Melania, and Trump. The decade-long receipts, if you convert it, 59 is technically only 16 in douche years. That is Trevor Noah in 2016, responding to Melania Trump calling her 59-year-old husband and Billy Bush two teenage boys over the leaked Access Hollywood tape. We've given you two full reports on Noah's 2026 material already. The Grammys Epstein joke, the Katie Couric documentary Fallout. Tonight we're doing something different, pulling back to show you the entire decade, because Noah's feud with the Trumps didn't start this year. It started in 2016, and it has followed a remarkably consistent pattern ever since. Then we're closing with breaking news that just escalated dramatically in the last few hours. Trump is now warning of an unprecedented massive attack on Iran. Let's go back to where this all began, because the 2016 material establishes exactly the comedic method Noah has used against this family for a full decade now. After the Access Hollywood tape leaked, Melania gave nearly identical interviews to both CNN and Fox News, defending her husband's crude comments about grabbing women as something she'd chalked up to locker room talk and peer pressure from Billy Bush. Noah put the two interviews side by side on The Daily Show and pointed out how eerily similar her answers were across both networks. In case you were wondering why it took Melania 10 days from the Billy Bush tape to speak out, from the looks of it, she was using that time to practice her lines, he said. Then came the line that connected this moment to an earlier controversy entirely. At least she's only plagiarizing herself now, so that is progress. That reference was to Melania's own Republican National Convention speech, which had lifted several lines directly from one of Michelle Obama's past Democratic convention speeches. A real, documented plagiarism controversy from earlier that same year. Noah's joke worked because it connected two separate scandals into a single, coherent character portrait. A pattern of borrowed words, whether from another political spouse's speech or from her own recycled talking points. It's worth explaining the original Melania plagiarism scandal.
And law firms and, all kinds of big business. And can he get away with that shit? Well, for a couple years, nobody was there to stop him, but it's not at all clear. And and we've talked about this quite a bit, within the law industries, within these individual firms, the people who kind of bent the knee and signed on have had a real fallout from it within their firms, people leaving, a kind of general disapprobation within the legal industry. They thought they kind of had to do it, and it's true. Trump was, coming down heavy, but the other firms who hung tough, I think it turns out, are going to have served themselves and their clients better. And we need to know sort of what happened, because I'll tell you one thing I do not think that happened. I don't think, as you say, once they were in the thrall to Trump, it never stopped. And I very much doubt there was some kind of deep chapter and verse of you'll do this, you'll do that. It was these vague terms, $100 million of pro bono services, but not to liberal causes or, whatever they were trying to say and execute. What the hell went on? What did it mean? What did it mean to bend the knee? There was a fundamental corruption and kind of pressure campaign against really important institutions in American life. And Jamie Raskin is saying, we're going to find out what happened. I think the odds of embarrassment for the Scaddons of the world are high. But this is part and parcel of the cleanup from Donald Trump. How did he get away with it? What did he get away with? Were there either like legal corners cut or just something that did, created a lot of ethical or other problems for these law firms? What did they agree to? We do not know that story yet, because they just came out of the box, throwing punches and forcing some institutions to genuflect. Others stood their ground. And look, it was a hard position from that pressure campaign for anybody based on Trump, but the country still doesn't know the story, and the Judiciary Committee has the right to try to unearth it. What the hell did this president do to not just the government, but really important civic institutions like law firms, like universities? And that was a big part of the whole Project 2025. And Raskin and others are saying, there's a big story to be uncovered and written here. And if we get the gavel, it's ours to uncover.
Those. Did you see what happened? No, I didn't. Where were you? Trevor was telling us about Brixton. It was such an insane story as well. Like, now I feel like the world we live in, I sometimes think about like parallel universes and timelines, and I'm not sure if I believe it, but when I do think about it, I go like, I think we somehow slipped into the ludicrous timeline. Like, we were all in a very normal timeline, us as people, and then something happened around like COVID, and then we went into the crazy timeline, and then the other versions of us are now like, wow, things have become very boring and normal. Because like, this is not normal, Like, the week starts off, it's been like 2 weeks technically. Right, starts off, Iran was negotiating a nuclear deal with America. Negotiating a deal. They're making progress. They're getting close. They're getting super close. And then Israel was like, no deal. And then Israel started launching missiles at Iran, right? And then it's hard to make a deal when it's like missiles hitting you, you know what I mean? It's like when you're like trying to break up with someone at a restaurant, and then the waiter keeps coming, is everything great? Just wait. Let me just handle.
In a bit more detail, because Noah's joke only fully lands once you understand exactly how documented that earlier controversy actually was. During her July 2016 Republican National Convention speech, Melania delivered passages that were, upon close comparison, virtually identical in structure and specific phrasing to sections of Michelle Obama's own 2008 Democratic National Convention address, down to matching sentence construction about the values parents instill in their children. The Trump campaign's initial response denied any wrongdoing, before eventually acknowledging a speechwriter's error days later. That the campaign's own handling of the scandal followed a documented denial-then-admission pattern is itself worth noting, because it establishes, from the very earliest days of Trump's political career, the exact same escalating denial rhythm that would go on to define so much of what Noah, and every comedian we've covered on this channel since, has spent the following decade documenting. Let's get to the teenage boys material specifically, because this is genuinely one of Noah's sharpest pieces of logical dismantling from that entire era. Melania had described the two grown men on that tape as behaving like two teenage boys. CNN's Anderson Cooper immediately pushed back, reminding her that her 59-year-old husband was, in fact, 59, not a teenager. Noah picked up that exact thread on his own show. How are you going to say that with a straight face? Your 59-year-old husband is a teenage boy? But okay, I guess I understand that. And then he delivered the joke that turned simple mockery into an actual argument. If you convert it, 59 is technically only 16 in douche years. And if he does act like a teenage boy, why would we let him be president? I wouldn't even trust a teenage boy with a pair of socks, much less nuclear weapons. Notice the structure of that closing line. Noah takes Melania's own defensive framing at face value, plays it out to its logical conclusion, and lands on a genuinely serious point about presidential judgment and nuclear authority, delivered as a punchline rather than a lecture. It's worth briefly explaining the Access Hollywood tape itself for anyone unfamiliar with it.
Congress member Jamie Raskin is sending a major warning to those law firms that bent the knee early in the Trump regime and entered into so-called settlement agreements. What were they settling? And settlement arrangements with the Trump regime to do so-called pro bono work. And Jamie Raskin signed and sent a letter to what was once a very prestigious firm. I mean, it was like the Harvard of big law. It was called Skadden. There's a bunch of other firms like that, but Skadden was one of the elite firms. I mean, one of the top places you could work for out of law school or anywhere. And Congressmember Raskin is letting Skadden and all these law firms know, if and when Democrats take over the House of Representatives, Jamie Raskin himself, a well-known constitutional law professor and constitutional lawyer before becoming a member of Congress, that he's going to be investigating these big firms. And while Donald Trump may have been given absolute immunity by the Supreme Court, Raskin and others, whether it's Senator Schiff, are going to be focused on these big law firms, amongst a number of other things that Raskin's going to have in his portfolio if and when he becomes the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Now, in this very powerful letter that Jamie Raskin put out, he said, you know, Skadden, you entered into this settlement agreement to provide $100 million of pro bono work for the Trump regime. We want more information about how that number was derived at. We want to see your hours. What's the work that you did? Because it doesn't seem that you're doing, say, pro bono work on issues that are supposed to, I don't know, help the people. Instead, you seem to just be an arm of the Trump regime as they've destroyed the Department of Justice, basically being their private law firm, providing free legal work as basically part of a broader scheme to kind of capture you and to have you work for the Trump regime, or else the Trump regime is going to do things to you. And one thing that's pointed out in this letter is in a case by shareholders against Intel brought in the Delaware Chancery Court, Intel did a deal with the United States government, Donald Trump taking over the methods and means of production, that basically gave the United States a 10%, a 9.9% ownership stake in Intel. And apparently Skadden was doing legal work for Intel and also was having this arrangement with the Trump regime. And so in the Delaware Chancery documents, it raises a lot of red flags of, were you representing both sides in this transaction? Were you complicit in diluting? These are questions being asked. Diluting the shareholders' value. You know, Donald Trump wants to, brags, and he goes, look, since the United States did this Intel deal, look at the value went up. You diluted the shareholders. I mean, you took a stake where that money could otherwise have been dividend out or been, given to, existing shareholders. You diluted them by giving the stake to the government, and it's unclear what you're even doing with it, where that money's going. How are you holding 10% of Intel? And you presume that the stock went up because of you, but what long-term issues have you compromised? And would the stock have gone up anyway at the time? And now that we're seeing the market hit more of a turbulence,
Mazraoui pushing the ball. There he is. Morocco coming down the right wing. They're coming. They're coming fast. Hakimi's a fast guy. He's got the ball. He shot it. It almost went in. It didn't go in. It could have gone in, but it didn't. It didn't go in. It didn't go in at all. It could have, but it didn't. Hakimi's such a fast guy. Hakimi, he's on the right. Should be on the left, I say. Sometimes I always put him there, but he's not there right now. But he could be. He could be. He could be. Brazil's supposed to be the best, but not good today. They're looking not good. I told them, let me coach you, but they didn't let me. They didn't allow me to coach, folks. They should have let me do it. I could have coached them, but they didn't let Bruno Guimaraes sit out play.
So you know how much money someone would make if they had just that commentary for the match. Yo, bro.
Its exact significance, because it remains one of the most consequential pieces of documented evidence in Trump's entire pre-presidential public record. The 2005 recording, leaked in October of 2016, captured Trump describing, in his own voice, unwanted sexual contact with women, including a specific description of grabbing women without consent. The tape's release nearly derailed his campaign entirely, and Melania's own defense of it. The boy talk and peer pressure framing Noah was mocking became one of the most scrutinized public statements of that entire election cycle, precisely because it required defending words that Trump himself had spoken, on tape, in his own unmistakable voice. If you're finding this retrospective as sharp as we do, hit that like button right now and subscribe to USA Press, because we're giving you the full decade here, not just this year's headlines. Stick around, because we're closing with breaking news from the last few hours that should genuinely alarm you. Let's jump forward to 2019, because this is where Noah's material shifted from mocking Melania directly to documenting Trump's own escalating feuds with other public figures, and it produced one of the more entertaining sequences of that entire year. Trump went on a Twitter tirade targeting musicians John Legend and Chrissy Teigen, upset that NBC anchor Lester Holt had interviewed Legend about criminal justice reform without, in Trump's view, giving Trump himself sufficient credit for the legislation. Trump called Legend boring and referred to Teigen as his filthy-mouthed wife. Teigen, notably, had not even been tagged in Trump's original post, and she responded anyway, with what Noah's own show described as a response too vulgar for the news to repeat. Noah, delivering the story to his own audience, relished the specific detail that Trump had been too cautious to even tag Teigen directly. Trump called her John Legend's filthy-mouthed wife, but because he didn't have the guts to tag her on Twitter, Chrissy Teigen called him her. And here, Noah simply said the actual phrase Teigen had used, unfiltered, on
2 Saudi Arabian tankers have been destroyed in the Bab el-Mandab Strait. Let me repeat that. 2 Saudi Arabian tankers have been destroyed in the Bab el-Mandab Strait. The Houthis in Yemen making good on their threat that if the United States struck Iran again, the Bab el-Mandab Strait would be closed down to Saudi Arabian tankers. And Yemen announced that it hit 2 Saudi tankers. We have video of that. I'll show you it in a moment. Also, in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran was able to strike yet another tanker there, and then 3 tankers that were trying to use the route that the United States is telling tankers to use, not the IRGC route. They turned around when they saw that Iran destroyed this other tanker. Earlier, Donald Trump announced yet another day of strikes against Iran. The Houthis in Yemen were ready. Iran was ready, and Iran struck back hard. There are currently strikes taking place in Kuwait and in other U.S. bases in the region. And of course, there was the incident I just described in the Bab el-Mandab Strait. We see the price of crude now at $95 a barrel. It shot up about $2 when we learned about those 2 Saudi tankers that were shot by the Houthis in Yemen. I believe, as I've been saying now for a long time, I probably sound like a broken record, we will be at $100 a barrel very soon. Here is the Yemeni Armed Forces spokesperson announcing the execution of this special operation. 2 tankers, one named Mansella, the other Laylia, were both struck by the Houthis. These were Saudi Arabian tankers. Let me show you video footage of what that looked like. Let's play it. This This has been confirmed by multiple other sources. Also, the IRGC announced 3 oil tankers incited and lured by the United States were attempting to pass through a mine-laden route in the southern part of the Strait of Hormuz. After a severe explosion and fire on one of them, the other 2 quickly turned around and retreated. Here we see some smoke plumes rising near the Ali al-Salam base in Kuwait after Iran continues to pummel these U.S. bases, which are essentially defenseless as the U.S. has run out or has been running low on its interceptors. That's why we've been seeing the U.S. moving a lot of its equipment to Israel right now. They still have an Iron Dome there. The U.S. bases in the Arab nations where a lot of our troops.
And he was just going back and forth. He's just like, Israel, shut up, baby. Come on, shut up. Sit up. How many times do I have to tell you kids that you're not going to? I told you once and I'll tell you again. And then he looked at the reporter and he did something I've never seen an American president do in my entire life. He cursed live on TV into the camera. Looked at the camera and he was like, they were like, what do you think, Mr.? He's like, I'll tell you what this is. You've got 2 countries that have been fighting so long, they don't know what the they're doing.
Air. A pussy-ass bitch. He followed with the dry observation. And to be honest, I don't know why the news can't say that on air. It's a well-known medical condition. It's worth explaining the actual policy substance underneath the Legend-Tagan feud, because it wasn't simply personal celebrity friction. It traced back to a real legislative achievement. The First Step Act, a genuine, bipartisan criminal justice reform bill Trump signed in December of 2018, reduced certain mandatory minimum sentences and expanded early release programs. And Trump had, by 2019, developed a documented habit of demanding public credit for the legislation whenever the topic of criminal justice reform arose in media coverage, regardless of who else, had contributed to the years of advocacy work that preceded it. Legend, along with his wife, had been vocal criminal justice reform advocates for years before that bill's passage, meaning Trump's grievance was less about factual credit being denied and more about his own need to be centered in a story about a much longer advocacy effort predating his presidency. Let me give you my full analysis of why that specific moment matters more than a simple celebrity feud recap, because it reveals something consistent about Noah's comedic instincts across this entire decade. He is not simply repeating insults for shock value. He is specifically pointing out the coward's logic embedded in Trump's own behavior, attacking someone's spouse by name while carefully avoiding tagging her directly, thereby inviting a response he then gets to act aggrieved about. That same pattern, provoke indirectly, then perform outrage when the target responds directly, is one we've now documented across nearly every feud covered on this channel, from the Jesus meme explanations to the Epstein Island denials. Now let's fast forward to the 2026 Grammys aftermath specifically, because we've covered Noah's own jokes extensively in previous reports, but we haven't given you the full text of the White House's actual official response, which deserves inclusion here because of how remarkably consistent its language is with insults. Trump's team has hurled at Noah across the entire decade we've just walked through. White House Communications Director Stephen Chung posted on X, and Trevor Noah is still a giant loser who will be forever known for being unceremoniously kicked off. The Daily Show for being a complete psychopath, only to be replaced by a rotating cast of even bigger snowflakes. Sit with that phrase for a moment, complete psychopath. Used to describe a comedian's exit from a hosting job, a considerably more extreme clinical term than the situation could possibly warrant. That escalating, personally pathologizing language is worth comparing directly to the douche years and filthy-mouthed material from a decade earlier. Noah's jokes have always stayed within the register of comedic exaggeration and logical extension, while the official responses from Trump's own team
plus 3 of the justices, the 4 most conservative, were ready to go the other direction. That is stunning and nauseating, really. Now, also Alito again and again, maybe the strongest sort of social culture warrior on the court, and maybe the one who's most personally acrimonious. You had that weird back and forth with Sotomayor a couple weeks ago where he was totally in the wrong. He sort of dyspeptically said, if I'd known you were going to read from the bench, I would have said more. But he did know, or he was informed. but there's no apology forthcoming. But all the bad storylines, and in particular, to my mind, I've just had a Substack on this, the really biggest decisions of the term, culminating in the Slaughter case. And they've just, over a number of years now, just completely demolished what we learned growing up in law school and third grade was a whole huge part of government running on expertise, nonpartisan conduct for the American people. It's basically out the window. It's a huge retrenchment. It's not even, because it's going back to where it was. Okay, but the Alito point itself. So, I'm with you. I hear you not saying, look, you're predicting it, but it already stood to reason that they've definitely done their big blows and damage. And if they can, and now might be the last chance, depending on the midterms, for them to try to shove through, just as the Senate did with Amy Coney Barrett, to very, very, mini-me replacements for Thomas and Alito, but much younger. Of course, there'll be immediate question, will Trump go that direction, or will he go with, as he's tended to do in Trump 2.0, the most completely reflexively loyal to him, like Emile Beauvais? But on your point, yes, she falls on her sword completely. Maybe that'll turn out to be the explanation, but it is bizarre. Nina Totenberg,
Let me just so what I'm saying is, how's everything going? Yeah. Look, hey, we'll call you. We'll call you, please. So Iran was like, all right, I can't. And so then Iran was like, missiles back at Israel, missiles. And then Israel was like, missiles. And then Iran was like, missiles. And it was going back and forth. Israel was definitely winning it because like Iran has missiles, but not like Israel's type of missiles. You know what I mean? Like Iran doesn't have much money and stuff. So their missiles are like those cheap fireworks your friends. You know when your parents they'd feel bad. You'd be like, what are we doing for Guy Fawkes Day? And then your parents would be like, do you want these ones? You're like, do you like them? They're like, no, just throw them on the ground. I was like, pat. Do you feel like the other kids? No, I don't at all. So Iran has those ones, and then they're launching back and forth. And the whole world was like, man, this again, Middle East conflict, Middle East. And then at the peak of it, everyone was like, man, how could this get worse? Donald Trump was like, hello. Donald Trump came in and he was like, I'm gonna help. I'm gonna totally de-escalate this situation. And we were like, my man, you've never de-escalated a thing in your life. From your hair to your politics, nothing is a de-escalation. Nothing. But Trump came in and he's like, I don't like how Iran and Israel are launching bombs at each other all the time. So many bombs, we can't have this, it's not right. Too many bombs, we gotta stop it. No more bombs, we gotta stop it, we gotta fix it. And they're like, all right, how are you gonna fix it? He's like, by dropping bombs. I'm gonna drop bombs.
Have consistently reached for language describing mental illness, criminality, or moral depravity. It's worth explaining the actual circumstances of Noah's Daily Show departure, because Chung's characterization of it as being unceremoniously kicked off bears essentially no resemblance to the documented real reporting on that transition. Noah left The Daily Show in December of 2022 by his own stated choice, citing a desire to return to stand-up touring and explore other creative projects after 7 years in the hosting chair, an amicable, voluntary departure covered extensively and without controversy by entertainment media at the time. For the White House communications director to retroactively characterize that voluntary exit as an unceremonious firing, years after the fact, in service of an insult about a Grammy Awards joke, represents exactly the kind of casual factual distortion we've documented across dozens of other administration statements on this channel. Reaching for whatever version of events serves the immediate rhetorical need, regardless of whether it matches the actual public record. Let's also revisit the specific detail about Nicki Minaj's own quote from that same Washington visit, because we only summarized it briefly before, and her actual words deserve to be heard in full, given how directly they connect to the broader thread running through this entire decade of material. Speaking at a Treasury Department-hosted summit promoting Trump accounts, Minaj said, "The hate or what people have to say, it does not affect me at all. It actually motivates me to support him more, and it's going to motivate all of us to support him more." Trump, at that same event, called Minaj great. That exchange, a public figure explicitly framing criticism as validation rather than something to actually engage with, is precisely the same rhetorical move we've documented from Trump's own team across a full decade of responses to Noah specifically. Criticism doesn't prompt reflection, it prompts a louder, more personal counterattack. Now, here's where we make the turn, because everything you just heard spans 10 years of documented, real material. It's worth briefly recapping the underlying conflict for anyone joining this coverage for the first time, because tonight's escalation only fully makes sense in context. The war between the United States and Iran, which began in late February, has centered largely on the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical oil shipping corridors. With both sides trading strikes and threats over the preceding months, a conflict we've tracked extensively across multiple previous reports on this channel, including the Pentagon's own escalating cost
urging forces, medics, and weaponry to the Middle East to give President Trump more muscular military options. That's what they're calling it. As he considers expanding the conflict against Iran in the past week, special operation forces have deployed to the region from their U.S. bases. Squadrons of jet fighters have been staged across the Middle East, and bomber aircraft at bases in the U.S. and U.K. are on high alert to ramp up operations. Additionally, more than 150 medics have arrived at the Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany in recent days. Another official said the hospital is the primary location for treating troops injured in combat in the Middle East. Now, Donald Trump gave a speech today in Georgia. He looked absolutely terrible. He looked like death. His face was red. He had 18 chins, screaming and ranting. He was saying, just so you remember what he was saying, we don't need Hormuz. We don't need the streets. We don't need the streets. Here, play the clip of what he was saying. Let's play it.
We don't need anything. We don't need the Hormuz Strait, but we do it because we have to do it, because we cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple.
Now, he's obviously going through some things right now as Iran continues to grind him to the ground right now. What else are we learning? Politico's latest report. The White House is at a maximum level of frustration right now. And I was told by very senior people that the president is now fully aware that the only way to victory that he wants is completely politically impossible. The American people just will not support the kind of escalation it would take at this point, said one person close to the White House, granted anonymity to discuss private conversation. We've got more dead Americans and a politically impossible situation. Right now, in terms of the MAGA base, only 37% of the MAGA base now supports this war relative to the economic consequences that this war is causing. CENTCOM continues to behave like an absolute clown. Really embarrassing that this is what CENTCOM has become. With everything I've shared with you, this is what CENTCOM posted moments ago. Today, Iran's IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard, claimed that it controls exits and entry to the Strait of Hormuz, suggesting that international mariners can only use routes the IRGC prefers. This is false. Fact, Iran does not control the Strait of Hormuz. The international waterway remains open for transit, regardless of IRGC threats and attacks. Commercial vessels continue to use the strait with U.S. military support. Since early May, American forces have helped more than 900 ships transit through the strait. I mean, while we see what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz with any tanker that tries to use the U.S. route getting obliterated and destroyed, the fact that CENTCOM is saying that's ridiculous. But even if you take CENTCOM at its word, okay, 900 ships since May, as Daniel Davis Deep Dive explains, 900 ships since May.
Very seldom have I looked at Trump and thought, yeah, I can relate to this. But he came out after Israel was about to launch a full-scale bombing attack on Iran. And he came out, he heard about this. Man didn't even put on a tie. Came out of the White House half-dressed, ran straight into reporters, and he went into it. He was like, I heard about what Iran is doing and what Israel is doing. And let me tell you, I'm angry at Iran, but I'm more angry at Israel. They said peace, and I said we're going to do peace, and they're launching, and I'm sick of them. Israel, you better not do it. You don't do it, Israel. I said peace. You don't do it. He looked like a dad who had kids that were fighting in the backyard.
Estimates and Secretary Hegseth's contentious Senate testimony. What we're bringing you next happened in the last few hours, and it represents a genuine, significant escalation in that exact same war. According to Al Jazeera's own live coverage from today, Trump has warned of an unprecedented massive attack on Iran, language considerably more severe than any of the specific infrastructure or nuclear site threats we've detailed in our previous reports on this exact conflict. This warning arrives alongside genuinely alarming new developments across the entire region. Kuwait confirmed that a fire caused by an attack on the Al Abdali border area has now been contained, while Bahrain reports coming under Iranian fire again, meaning the conflict has now directly touched at least 4 separate Gulf nations beyond Iran and the United States themselves. And in a detail that connects directly to the shipping disruption story we covered in an earlier report, Iran-backed Houthi militants said today they struck 2 tankers in the Red Sea, opening what NBC's own reporting describes as a second critical choke point entirely distinct from the Strait of Hormuz, meaning Iran and its allied forces are now actively threatening 2 of the most strategically vital shipping corridors in the entire global economy simultaneously. It's worth pausing on the Kuwait and Bahrain detail a bit longer, because both nations hosting significant American military infrastructure adds real strategic weight to their involvement. Both countries serve as important bases for US military operations throughout the Gulf region, meaning attacks reaching their territory represent a direct escalation against the broader American military presence in the region, not simply collateral regional spillover from a conflict confined to Iran and its immediate neighbors. That the fighting has now demonstrably reached the doorstep of American regional military infrastructure is precisely the kind of development that tends to accelerate.
In time, is this the right way to run Intel, by having the government take over Intel? And so there are these questions. Are you an instrument to do these Trump-related deals? And I think the broader point is these firms, if they thought that they were buying Trump's silence, by the way, they really aren't, because they're under his thumb every step of the way. Once you make a deal like that with Trump, he doesn't let up. But I think Raskin and others are letting them know, oh, no. You've bought yourself a future when we're in control of accountability, and you have different accountability structures than sadly the Supreme Court has given Donald Trump, but we're focused on you. So I think that's part of it as well. I want to call in Harry Littman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Talking Feds Substack. And Harry, that Intel deal, 10% being taken away, it's fascinating that you go into this letter and they talk about how Skadden advised Intel on the transaction, a representation that the complaint correctly notes presents a host of conflicts given Skadden's agreement. The biggest, most glaring conflict, if you got this question wrong on your professional responsibility test, you should fail that one.
And many others. Look, this is what you and I did another discussion about Jeffrey Epstein and Raskin serving notice. This is Raskin saying again, the cavalry is coming and you guys best be ready. And we've adverted different times to internal debates within the Democratic Party or Democratic members in Congress about how aggressive to be in terms of accountability, backward looking, forward looking. This is one very powerful Democrat who's going to be at the head of a committee. And we've seen over the last few years how sort of dictatorial Republican leaders can be. He's going to be at the head, and he is definitely looking for accountability. And this is actually, they have every right to do it. They're just calling in private citizens, sure, but to find out what the hell happened with the government these last few years. Remember, Trump comes out of the box like February, and this was a whole series of moves that left many of us, I would count me there, reeling like, how the hell, oh my God, he is trying to leverage his power to control universities.
I understand people will vote for the politics they want to vote for. I get that. What I don't understand is why people voted for him. What was even crazier was that some people voted for him and then were disappointed by who he was. People were there like, I can't believe what he's doing right now. I just can't believe what he's doing. I'm sorry, you can't believe what's happening? Donald Trump, can you believe this? Can I believe that he's doing the exact same thing he's been doing for his whole life? Yeah, I can't believe this. There's a shock. You're shocked? Donald Trump is the least shocking human being I've ever come across in my life. He is consistently being himself. The man is a cliched villain.
looks like a villain, talks like a villain. Like he looks like he should be in a Scooby-Doo episode. With that face, with that vibe, you could see him in the lineup when they're trying to solve the crime. Who do you think it is, Scoob? Oh, it wasn't me, I'll tell you that much. I didn't do anything, I'm innocent. It'd be like, I'm innocent, so innocent. Some say the most innocent man who's ever lived. Be like, yeah, I think it's that guy.
Rate, rather than de-escalate a conflict of this scale. Let's connect this to the financial scale of what's actually being requested, because Al Jazeera's own reporting reveals a figure considerably larger than what we detailed in our earlier report on Hegseth's Senate testimony. Defense Secretary Hegseth and Joint Chiefs Chairman Kaine are now seeking a $1.5 trillion budget, which includes $70 billion specifically earmarked for the Iran war. Compare that to the $67 billion supplemental request we detailed just weeks ago. The number has already grown again, continuing the exact same pattern of escalating cost estimates we identified across 3 successive congressional appearances in our earlier reporting. It's worth putting that $1.5 trillion figure in proper perspective, because the scale is genuinely difficult to grasp in the abstract. That total represents a defense budget request approaching the entire annual federal discretionary spending across virtually every other category of government combined in a typical year. Meaning the Pentagon's own requested budget, even setting aside the specific $70 billion Iran war component, has grown to a scale that dwarfs nearly every other federal priority being debated in Congress. This same session, including the very Trump accounts payments and domestic spending priorities we've referenced in earlier reports. Let me give you my full analysis of why the phrase unprecedented massive attack deserves to be taken with genuine seriousness rather than treated as typical wartime rhetorical bluster, because the surrounding context this week gives that specific language real weight. This is not an isolated escalatory statement delivered in a vacuum. It arrives the same week as confirmed strikes reaching Kuwait and Bahrain, a second shipping choke point opening in the Red Sea, and a defense budget request that has grown yet again to encompass a genuinely staggering total federal commitment. When a president uses the specific word unprecedented to describe a planned military action, in the same week that the conflict has already expanded to touch 4 additional nations beyond the original combatants, that combination of rhetoric and documented regional escalation deserves to be treated as a serious warning rather than dismissed as typical political bluster. Let's also connect this to the broader domestic political picture unfolding in this exact same way.
Law firms, their chairs and their top partners, they don't want to be at these hearings under oath. I mean, you know, and I think back to, you remember those steroid hearings in the early, was that the 2000s or the late 90s with Mark McGuire and this person and that person? You're going to have, in my opinion, the top partners at these firms, Harry, probably invoking the fifth. And these are people, and these are people, they know it's coming too. And so when you're the chair of Skadden, when you're the chair of, I can go on and list these firms, in the back of your mind, you know, 2 years, 3 years, there's going to be a day where you're sitting there across from Jamie Raskin when you want to be in legacy mode and you're going to be there with your kids and your grandkids watching you, and you're going to be invoking the fifth and everything you've done your entire legal career. The grades you got in college, the law school you went to, the clerkship that you had, you will be remembered by that scene, and that will be the shame you will take to your grave. Harry, anything else you want to say?
Wow. I'm scared now, and I wasn't subpoenaed. But you're totally right, and I think it's a good analogy, right? That's, you know, Mark McGuire hit some hellacious home runs. Barry Bonds stats can't be better of anyone all time in baseball. Roger Clemens. It is now what we think. And, you know, at the time they were in a pressure cooker. They thought they had to act fast. And they made certain, you know, Trump was putting maximum pressure on. But the reason this could happen, Ben, is just because, even though, as you say, Trump has immunity, finding out what occurred in government, the way media companies and universities and law firms were really commandeered by this guy, that's up Jamie Raskin's alley, and he's not going to be shy about it.
Everybody, make sure you subscribe to Harry Litman's YouTube channel. It's called Talking Feds. And do me a favor, when you watch a Harry video, if you've got a copy of WTF America, put in Harry's comments, WTF, and that'll let Harry know that I sent you. All right, go to Talking Fed, search it. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Ben. We're prepping for the deluge of WTFs. It's okay.
Hey, if you want the full story, how democracy got here and how we take it back, pre-order.
He's accused of lying about the value of his properties for decades to defraud the banks into giving him better loans, right? And these are not small amounts. They're not small amounts. For instance, Mar-a-Lago was worth $75 million. And what did Trump say it was worth? $740 million. How? Because I upgraded it, folks. Yeah. Totally upgraded. I added a rec room. It's got a foosball table and everything. He also claimed that his 11,000 square foot apartment was actually 30,000 square feet, which was a lie. So this man is going to be the first person to ever get in legal trouble for claiming his apartment is a grower, not a shower. And I've got to say, it would be so funny if this is what takes Trump down, huh? Can you imagine? He tried to overthrow the government, but then they get him for lying about having an in-unit washer-dryer. It's like, that's the thing that locks him up.
Window, because it adds important context about where support for this war actually stands within Trump's own coalition. NBC News' own reporting confirms that Michigan progressive Senate candidate Abdul El-Sayed picked up a fresh endorsement today from Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota, part of what NBC describes as a broader group of Democratic senators who have grown openly critical of Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer's approach to managing intra-party primary contests. That kind of internal Democratic Party tension, playing out in real time during an active war, suggests the broader political environment remains genuinely unsettled on multiple fronts simultaneously. Not simply a story of Republican unity behind an escalating war, but a moment of real uncertainty across the entire political spectrum about how to respond to it. Let me give you my prediction section now, clearly labeled. Prediction 1. Expect the massive attack warning to be followed within days by actual confirmed strikes of a scale exceeding anything we've documented in this conflict so far, because the specific word unprecedented, combined with the current pace of nightly strikes already exceeding a dozen consecutive nights, suggests this is building toward a genuine inflection point rather than simply more rhetoric. Prediction 2. Watch for the Red Sea choke point to become an increasingly significant economic story in its own right over the coming weeks, distinct from the Strait of Hormuz coverage we've detailed previously, because two simultaneously threatened shipping corridors represents a fundamentally more severe threat to global energy markets than either choke point alone. Prediction 3, and this is the one that matters most. Expect the $1.5 trillion total defense budget request, with its embedded $70 billion Iran allocation, to face the same kind of contentious Senate scrutiny we documented in Hegseth's earlier testimony, because a budget figure of that overall
equals about 11 a day. That's less than 10% of the pre-war volume. Not exactly something you should be bragging about. And even that number includes ships that pass through the northern route approved by Iran. Nobody is fooled by this embarrassing attempt to put lipstick on a pig. The Strait of Hormuz remains under Iranian control. And that's just an objective damn fact. That's just the reality. Donald Trump was in Dover, Delaware, at the dignified transfer. He refused to bow his head, notably. Also, Donald Trump put words in the mouth of our fallen soldiers, service members, as even Justice Amash says, it's disgusting and shameful that the President of the United States to put words in the mouths of departed service members. Seriously, what a sick, vile piece of you-know-what he is. I mean, this is a scumbag and a vile piece of trash saying this about our service members. Let's not mince words. This ain't corporate news. Honestly, this is a piece of human trash right here, saying that our service members all said very strongly we cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. Shut up. How dare you, you idiot. You freaking loser, put these words in the mouths of service members. You lying loser piece of crap. Here, play this clip.
Some of you are going with us to honor our heroes, and they are indeed great heroes, actually. They said, and all of them said very strongly, we can't let cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. They won't have a nuclear weapon. So we're going to honor them.
Sorry, I just get so angry thinking about him lying about what our service members said. Seriously, what an ass. I mean, just what a horrible freaking human being this vile thing is in the White House. Also, Donald Trump said that the war with Iran is a skirmish. It's only a skirmish, and they're begging for a deal. This is what he said earlier. Let's play it.
And the stock market has said, and that's what this skirmish we have going on. I call it a skirmish because every time they make a deal, they want to change it and everything. They're not ready. They'll be ready very soon. And this is despite this. It's going on. The stock market has hit 73 all-time highs since the election. Think of that.
We'll keep you posted every step of the way, folks. By the way, make sure you pre-order a copy of WTF America. Hit the QR code at the end of this. It really helps if you do the pre-order right now. Hit subscribe. Thanks for watching.
Breaking news right now. My brothers and I wrote a book. It's called...
One glimmer of hope that I get from Donald Trump is that, like, he also doesn't know what he's doing. He's in it with us, which is a nice change. Oftentimes we're at the mercy of those in power, but he's in the mercy with us. Like, we're all locked in a prison cell, but he's holding the key and he's like, we're all trapped, we're all trapped. What are we gonna do? We're like, use the key. What are you talking about? And the reason I say this is because Trump came out and he hosted a press conference about it. It was so wild. He hosted a press conference about dropping the bombs. And he was shocked in the press conference. He came out and he's like, earlier today, the United States military, that's us, launched missiles, bunker busters, launched missiles on Iran, on all their nuclear facilities. And boy, you don't understand. You've never seen bombs like that before. They came down and they dropped them, those bombs. I couldn't believe what those bombs were doing. I couldn't believe it. And I called. I'm the one who called. I said, drop the bomb. I didn't know I was gonna call. I said 2 weeks. I told everybody 2 weeks. It was gonna be 2 weeks. And then I was on the plane. Then I said, I'm calling. Drop the bombs. And the bombs were dropped. I'd never seen bombs like that. I said, whoa, we're never dropping bombs like that again. I never seen bombs like that. Those bombs were dropped, and now it's over. We're all good. And so now, because America had dropped bombs on them, then Iran had to respond, but then Iran didn't want to get into a fight. No one wants to get into a fight with America, you know what I mean? And so like Iran was like, we are going to retaliate against you. And then they launched missiles at an American base in Qatar, but then they phoned America first. They did. They were like, all right, we are launching bombs against you in like 45 minutes, an hour maybe. You tell us how long you need. Then we'll launch the bombs. And then the Americans cleared out their base and everything important, and then the bombs fell. And then Trump, very, like, in an interesting way, he responded to Iran. Then he wrote on his like thing online on his profile, he was like, thank you to Iran for giving us notice about the bombs. Now it's over. It's all over. There will be peace. And then he said, Iran, Israel, peace. And they were like, all right, peace. All good. Then Trump went to sleep.
Scale, requested during an active war whose costs have now grown across 4 separate congressional appearances, is exactly the kind of number that tends to generate sustained bipartisan sticker shock once its full scope becomes clear to the broader public. It's worth expanding on that Democratic Senate primary tension a bit further because it reveals a genuine, ongoing struggle within the opposition party about how aggressively to position itself heading into a midterm cycle defined by an unpopular war and mounting economic strain. Senators publicly breaking from their own leadership's preferred approach to intra-party primaries, endorsing more progressive challenges rather than deferring to establishment picks, suggests a party genuinely uncertain about whether its winning strategy for November involves cautious institutionalism or a more combative, populist posture. A debate playing out in real time, primary by primary, even as the war itself continues generating fresh headlines every single day. Here is the deeper truth connecting everything we've covered tonight. Trevor Noah has spent a full decade pointing out the same basic pattern in this family's public conduct: provoke, deny, escalate, and respond to any pushback with language considerably more extreme than the original provocation ever warranted.
Really don't have effective interceptors at this point. Iran's been able to also strike those early detection radar systems. More footage right here of the Ali al-Salam Air Base in Kuwait. You see the smoke there. Now, the United States airstrikes today apparently focused on a border crossing between Iraq and Iran, where there were numerous civilians. There are reports of casualties right now. We will continue to see what's going on there. Let me show you the scene as the United States struck a border crossing that had civilians, the Iraq and Iran border crossing. You see photos right here, but let's play this clip.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله نربو السلام.
Now, I'll share with you what's going on right now in Yemen, just to give you a sense of the dynamic in Yemen. A large part of Yemen, Sana'a, the capital, controlled by the Houthis. That's by the Bab el-Mandab Strait. The Houthis are aligned with Iran. The government of Yemen that's recognized, though, by the international community is not the Houthis. It is a Saudi-backed government right there. And so there's currently fighting breaking out right now between the Saudi-backed government and the Houthis. We have footage of that. You should also know, layer on top of that, that Pakistan entered into a defense alliance with Saudi Arabia recently, where Pakistan is obligated to defend Saudi Arabia from attacks. So one of the things that Pakistan was saying that it was offering Saudi Arabia was protection against the Houthis in Bab el-Mandab. So that didn't happen. So we'll follow what's going on there, because this is becoming a massive regional war. And as the United States security umbrella fails, that's one of the reasons that Donald Trump, in my view, has now allowed Saudi Arabia to have access to nuclear material and nuclear enrichment, because that's the art of the deal. When your security umbrella fails and Saudi Arabia does quid pro quos with you got to pay him some way. Same thing with the United Arab Emirates, right? Security umbrella failing. Dubai, Abu Dhabi. What do they get? They get the semiconductor chips, the classified semiconductor chips that we would never otherwise give. And they're obviously going to give that to China. That's how weak and pathetic Donald Trump is. Let me show you these intense clashes going on right now between the Yemeni armed forces and the forces loyal to Saudi Arabia. Major, major fighting breaking out in Yemen right now. Let's play it. I've got more footage of that as well. Let's play it. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal is reporting 150 medical personnel have arrived in recent days at the Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany. Why? Because there are a lot of casualties taking place that the Trump regime continues to cover up. The Wall Street Journal reports that in addition, the U.S. is serving
Song of the Year. Congratulations, Billie Eilish. Wow. That is a Grammy that every artist wants. Almost as much as Trump wants Greenland, which makes sense. I mean, because Epstein's island is gone, he needs a new one to hang out with Bill Clinton. So, oh, I told you it's my last year. What are you going to do about it?
Douche Year's jokes met with complete psychopath accusations, a beauty pageant of insults where the response always outweighs the original joke. That exact same pattern, provoke, deny, escalate, is now playing out on a global scale, in a war that started with strikes on a handful of targets and has, within months, expanded to threaten shipping through 2 separate ocean choke points, touch 4 additional sovereign nations, and require budget requests now measured in the trillions rather than the billions. The scale is different. The underlying instinct, meet any resistance with an escalation considerably larger than what preceded it, is exactly the same. This is USA Press. If tonight's decade-long retrospective connected pieces you hadn't seen laid out together before, hit that like button right now. It costs you 1 second, and it puts this reporting in front of thousands more people who need to see the full pattern, not just this year's headlines, especially given how much perspective gets lost when a decade of consistent behavior only ever gets covered one isolated news cycle at a time. Subscribe to USA Press and turn on notifications, because between the Iran escalation, the Red Sea choke point, and whatever Trevor Noah says about any of it next, we are not going anywhere. Drop a comment and tell us, was douche years from 2016 or pussy-ass bitch from 2019 the funniest thing Noah's ever said about this family? And does unprecedented massive attack strike you as genuine military planning or the same escalatory rhetoric we've heard from this administration all year? We want to hear where you land. Stay sharp, stay informed, and remember, a decade of receipts doesn't lie, even when the story keeps repeating itself.